Order, please. Before we begin the daily routine, the subject for this evening's late debate was submitted by the Honourable Member for Cape Breton South. Therefore, be resolved the $147 million tax cut means, and $155 check means, less money is available for vital services like health, education, and transportation. Be debated this evening at 6 p.m. Begin the daily routine presenting and reading petitions. The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg leave to table a petition on behalf of several Pictou County residents who are concerned about spot checks on motor vehicles. And the operative clause is that we, the undersigned, wish to protest the ongoing campaign called Operation Impact that unfairly targets rural residents. It's been signed by 55 Pictou County residents, and I've affixed my signature as well.
Good member. Petition is tabled. Presenting reports of committees. Table reports, regulations, and other papers. I'd like the Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, in my capacity as Attorney General and pursuant to Section 51 of the Judicature Act, I hereby table amendments to the civil procedure rules that were made pursuant to the Judicature Act by the judges of the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal on the 17th day of November 2003. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The document is tabled. At this time, I'd like to table the annual report of the Nova Scotia Freedom of Information Protection and Privacy Review Office for the period January 1, 2003 to December 31, 2003. Statements by ministers. The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Labour.
Oh, sorry. No statement.
Government notice of motion. The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I give notice that on a future day I shall read and table a message from Her Honour the Lieutenant Governor transmitting the estimate of sums required for the service of the province for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2005 for the consideration of this House. Also table the estimate book, table the Crown Corporation business plan, table the estimate and Crown Corporation business plan resolutions, and deliver my budget speech, and move that the estimate of sums required for the service of the province for the fiscal period March 31st, 2005 being supplied to be granted to Her Majesty, and the Crown Corporation's business plan be referred to the Committee of the Whole House on Supply. And Mr. Speaker, for the information of the House, the budget will be presented on Thursday, April the 22nd of this week.
Notice is tabled. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas during Education Week, we give awards to honour teachers in our province who educate young Nova Scotians and help shape our society. And whereas this year, we gave an Education Week Partner Award to Marilyn Webster, a science teacher who works in the Department of Education to develop curriculum and provide teacher professional development. And whereas teachers across the province applaud Marilyn's extensive knowledge and enthusiasm for making science fun for students and teachers alike, as well as her volunteer contribution to science fairs at the provincial and national levels. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House thank Marilyn for her service to Nova Scotia as a leader in science education. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers, it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Michael Hewitt has served for 7 years as chair of the Occupational Health and Safety Appeal Panel, and whereas Mr. Hewitt was also the founding chair of the Occupational Health and Safety Appeal Panel when it began operating in 1997, and whereas Mr. Hewitt made a significant contribution to occupational health and safety in this province, not only through his work on the panel, but also as a facilitator for the Occupational Health and Safety Advisory Council and as chair of a working group on underground mining regulations. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House thank Mr. Hewitt for his years of valuable service and wish him all the best on his move to British Columbia. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas representatives from Service Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, several municipalities, the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities, and the Association of Municipal Administrators has developed a website template for municipalities to deliver web-based information and service to their residents. And whereas the template will help municipalities build a functional, user-friendly website without investing a lot of time, money, and resources to enable access to municipal and provincial services through the internet more effectively. And whereas Nova Scotia continues to be in the forefront of providing e-services, therefore be it resolved that members of this House congratulate representatives of the Nova Scotia Government, Nova Scotia e-Government Provincial Municipal Joint Venture Group for developing the website template, which is an important step towards seamless e-government. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passes without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice, and on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas a 13-part worldwide broadcast series deal has been signed between Halifax Arcadia Entertainment and National Geographic Channels International. Whereas this deal will see the series broadcast in 143 countries around the world on National Geographic channels in 25 different languages. And whereas the 13-part series will be finished by the end of 2004, examines the world of technology and the world's vast oceans, including habitats found under sea and even the watery sound stages used for megapictures such as the Pirates of the Caribbean. Therefore, be it resolved, the efforts of Halifax Arcadia Entertainment be recognized by all members while recognizing the company's continued success. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Mr. Speaker, before I enter my resolution, I would like to beg your indulgence to introduce some friends that we have here in the legislature today. Today in the East Gallery, we have students from grade 11, Central Kings High School, the new school which has just opened a new junior high wing, although the grade 11 students were not able to enjoy that. I'm sure that they're very pleased that their colleagues in grades 7 to 9 are in a new wing. Anyways, with them today would be their teacher Jolie McPhee, Stephanie Johnson, and Gay West, and 26 grade 11 students from the beautiful Annapolis Valley Central Kings High School. Please rise and accept the warm greetings from the members of the House.
Certainly welcome our special guests to the gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings and their tour of the legislature. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the week of April the 19th to the 23rd is Foster Family Recruitment Week in Nova Scotia, and foster care resource teams are working across the province to raise awareness about the rewards of fostering a child or youth. And whereas in Nova Scotia, foster parents work as part of a team of professionals who ensure that the children and youth receive the love and support they need. And whereas Nova Scotia is committed to attracting and training caring families who can help children and youth, and that Nova Scotia has made great strides in recruiting and retaining foster parents in recent years with significant success. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House commend Nova Scotia's existing foster families and encourage more families to open their hearts and homes to children in need. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. Introduction of bills. The Honourable Member for Annapolis.
Speaker, I beg leave to table a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of the 1994-95, the Gaming Control Act.
The Honourable Member for Annapolis begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Gaming Control Act.
Bill 53, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 4 of the Acts of 1994-95, the Gaming Control Act.
Or this bill be read a second time at a future date. The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce an act to amend Chapter 35 of the Acts of 1881, an act to incorporate St. Peter's Evangelical Lutheran Church of Chester, Lunenburg County.
The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 35 of the Acts of 1881, an act to incorporate St. Peter's Evangelical Lutheran Church of Chester, Lunenburg County.
Sorry. Bill 54, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 35 of the Acts of 1881, an act to incorporate St. Peter's Evangelical Lutheran Church of Chester, Lunenburg County.
Or this bill be read a second time at a future date. The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to introduce an act to authorize the municipality of the District of Chester to provide a retiring allowance for Barry Lenahan.
The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's beg leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to authorize the municipality of the District of Chester to provide a retiring allowance for Barry Lenahan.
Bill 55, entitled An Act to authorize the municipality of the District of Chester to provide a retiring allowance for Barry Lenahan.
Or this bill be read a second time at a future date. The honourable member for Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to, Mr. Speaker, if I could, I'd like to, through you, make an introduction before I introduce this bill. Mr. Speaker, in your gallery, I would like to introduce a member who has given his lifetime to the Nova Scotia Federation of Anglers and Hunters and erstwhile the Nova Scotia Wildlife Federation. Mr. Speaker, for 15 years, Tony Rogers has been the executive director of the Federation, and I'd ask Tony to rise and receive a warm welcome from the House. Mr. Speaker, I beg leave to introduce a bill, an act to amend Chapter 148 of the Acts of 1930, an act to incorporate the Nova Scotia Fish and Game Protective Association and County or District Fish and Game Association.
The honourable member for Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley begs leave to introduce a bill entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 148 of the Acts of 1930, an act to incorporate the Nova Scotia Fish and Game Protective Association and County or District Fish and Game Associations.
Bill 56, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 148 of the Acts of 1930, an act to incorporate the Nova Scotia Fish and Game Protective Association and County or District Fish and Game Associations.
Or this bill be read a second time at a future date. Notice the motion. The honourable member for Timberlea Prospect.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll be asking for waiver and passage without debate. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the legendary Montreal Canadiens last evening eliminated the Boston Bruins in another historic struggle between those two original 6 NHL teams, and whereas there are many more knowledgeable hockey fans across this province other than the MLA for Timberlea Prospect, whereas among these hockey experts are included Laura and Mike Bootler, Pat White, Brian Feetham, Ron Shanks, Dennis Doyle, the MLAs for Cape Breton Centre, Sackville Cobequid, Inverness, Lunenburg West, etc., and the very own and very hockey-wise member from Pictou Centre, our Premier. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the fans of the Montreal Canadiens on their victory over the Bruins with best wishes in their pursuit of another Stanley Cup. I ask for waiver and passage without debate.
Hear a nay. I hear a nay. I hear a no. Notice is table. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
All right, Brookstar, yes.
Order, please. The honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's youth are our trustees to tomorrow's prosperity, and whereas the unemployment for Nova Scotia's youth is twice the provincial rate of unemployment, and whereas 3 out of 4 young Nova Scotians refuse to vote because of an apathy, a sense of apathy, therefore be it resolved the provincial government develop a long-term comprehensive employment strategy for Nova Scotia's youth. And Mr. Speaker, I would ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester, Muscatine Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's approximately 850 beef farmers and thousands of woodlot owners have experienced a year like no other in the resource-based history. And whereas the BSE catastrophe and Hurricane Juan placed enormous financial and emotional strains upon not only the beef farmers and their families, woodlot owners and their families as well. And whereas this financial burden could be alleviated dramatically if individuals impacted could be shown a form of tax relief, whether it is allowing them to submit their tax returns a number of months late this year once they finally know their true financial position, or even a 1-year tax hiatus to relieve their suffering and uncertainty. Therefore be it resolved that the Speaker write and submit this resolution to the Prime Minister and Canada's Minister of Natural Revenue for their consideration and hopeful approval. And Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Cole Harbour District High School has a long tradition of success in high school athletics in Nova Scotia, in particular with regard to wrestling. Whereas the Cole Harbour District High School wrestling team has won the provincial senior championship the previous 3 years. Whereas the Cole Harbour District High School wrestling team was again successful in the provincial championships in 2004, winning the senior boys championship for the 4th straight year, and the senior girls and intermediate boys were runner-ups. Therefore, be it resolved that this House congratulate the Cole Harbour District High School wrestling team and, in particular, coaches Sean Kent, Daryl Dempster, TJ Grant, and Bo Gay, and the team members, especially those that won gold medals at the provincial championships: Brandon Benjamin, Chris Vining, Ryan McCoe, Kyle Corbett, Kyle Scott, Mike Delaney, Ian Grant, Melissa Ashton, Janine Publicover, Sharice McDonald, and Patricia White. And I ask for waiver, Mr. Speaker.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the story of the King's Mutual Insurance Company is more than that of a successful corporation, reflects the social, agricultural, and municipal development of Nova Scotia over the past 100 years. And whereas the company had its roots in the orchard of South Berwick at the start of the 20th century, when a group of farmers began looking for affordable insurance to protect themselves from financial ruin through loss of property or livestock. And whereas those concerned farmers and those who joined them and followed them over the ensuing century were not concerned only about their own livelihoods, they were and are dedicated, community-minded citizens with a deep commitment to the principle that sparked the formation of the company and which stands as its motto, neighbour helping neighbour. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House congratulate and commend this Annapolis Valley Company on the occasion of their 100th anniversary. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Guysborough, Sheet Harbour.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in 2001, our Premier launched on behalf of Nova Scotians the Campaign for Fairness, calling on Ottawa to recognize agreements with the province dating to the 1980s that say Nova Scotia should be the main beneficiary of offshore royalties. And whereas the major issue is that every dollar in royalty revenues our province loses 70 cents due to a clawback on equalization payments. And whereas in this February budget the federal government took its first financial step to acknowledge the rights of Nova Scotians to have a greater claim to their offshore resources by resetting the clawback to 2000-2001. When the Sable Gas project started rolling. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House applaud this positive first step taken by the federal government and urge them to fulfill the commitments made to the people of Nova Scotia under the Canada-Nova Scotia Offshore Accord. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 128th Westminster Kennel Club show took place in New York in February, and whereas 2,624 dogs participated in the two-day show at Madison Square Garden, and whereas 2004 marked the first showing at Westminster for the Nova Scotia Duck-Trolling Retriever, which is a newly recognized breed in the United States. Therefore, be resolved this House congratulates the dedicated Nova Scotia dog owners and breeders who maintain the Nova Scotia Duck-Trolling Retriever and worked to gain wide recognition for our province's official dog. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, agreed? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas volunteer fire departments are an integral part of the emergency response system of Nova Scotia, and whereas volunteer firefighters have a long and proud history of protecting and serving the communities in which they live, and whereas volunteer firefighters train on their own time at their own expense, saving the taxpayers of Nova Scotia millions of dollars, therefore be it resolved that all members of this House honour the 14 volunteer fire departments in Victoria the Lakes, and indeed all fire departments in the province. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, agreed? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Chester St. Margaret's.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that at a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the government of Lebanon, as a way of recognizing the various contributions made by Lebanese people worldwide, established the Day of Lebanese Immigrant, and whereas I recently had the pleasure of attending the Lebanese Immigrant Day ceremonies 2004 in Nova Scotia, and whereas remarks offered by the President of the Canadian Lebanon Society of Halifax, Yusuf Padour, stated, "The Lebanese have been most fortunate to have Canada as our adopted home because it meant living in a nation where everyone's heritage is respected and voiced, and that Canada was a place of dreams with a positive outlook for the future. Therefore, be it resolved, MLAs congratulate the Canadian Lebanon Society of Halifax on their annual Awards and Information Day and wish them continued success." Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Waivers, agreed? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Halifax, Shabakto.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I too will be seeking waiver. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Tyler Richards, forward for St. Pat's High School Provincial Champion Division I boys basketball team, was recently the only player selected in Atlantic Canada to be on the All-Canadian Division I boys basketball team, and whereas Tyler will be competing in Toronto on May 5th, and whereas St. Pat's High School Division I boys basketball coach Irvin Carvery was also selected as an all-star Division I boys team coach. Therefore, be it resolved that this House extend our congratulations to both Tyler Richards and to Irvin Carvery on their selection for national recognition, and wish them both all the best in Toronto on May 5th and in their future endeavours in basketball. Mr. Speaker, I seek waiver of notice, passage without debate.
Request for waivers, agreed? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Digby, Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Digby High School's Envirothon team recently competed in the qualifier for the Cannon International Envirothon held in Tatamagouche. Whereas this year's competition focused on natural resources management in an urban environment and had team members Sean Oliver, Molly Warner, Kay Dion, and Jill Baltzer coming up with solutions for soil management, forestry, aquatics, and wildlife. Whereas this year's team placed first in aquatics section, second in forestry, and third in wildlife, with an overall third place finish. Therefore, be it resolved, members of this House congratulate the Envirothon team for Digby Regional High School. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Shelburne.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 3-goal performance from Shannon Smith paced the Shelburne County Bantam Flames to a 5-1 win over Port Hood, Inverness County in the 2003-2004 Nova Scotia Bantam Hockey Championship at a tournament in Bedford over the March break. And whereas the provincial title for the Shelburne Bantam Flames was their 4th in 6 years, and whereas the Flames shown the example of an excellent championship hockey club limited Port Hood to only 4 shots on goal in the final period. Therefore, be it resolved, MLAs applaud the efforts of Coach Andrew Holland and the Shelburne County Bantam Flames for winning their Nova Scotia hockey title and wish them continued success both on and off the ice. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the River John Winter Carnival held in February hosted the first good old hockey game tournament, and whereas hundreds of people spent hours watching the outdoor fun from lawn chairs, picnic tables, and snowbanks on the pond behind the River John Legion, and whereas 5 mixed teams of men, women, and children competed for the village trophy, therefore be it resolved that this Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate the organizers of the River John Winter Carnival for keeping alive our rich hockey heritage and bringing back some good old-fashioned fun. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of motion and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas April 19th to the 23rd is National Medical Laboratory Week, and whereas medical laboratory technologists play an integral role in our healthcare system by working with our healthcare professionals to provide effective patient care. And whereas yesterday, medical lab technologists held an open house at the Cape Breton Regional Hospital to celebrate this week and to inform both the public and young people of the vital role medical lab technologists play in our healthcare system. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of this House recognize medical lab technologists throughout this province for the vital role they play in every aspect of healthcare and extend our best wishes to all of them during this National Week and in all the times ahead. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Turks Caicos is a Caribbean treasure consisting of 40 islands and a population of almost 19,000 people that is currently governed as a British territory. And whereas the government of the Turks and Caicos has expressed an interest in joining Canada, and whereas the province of Nova Scotia has a long and proud history of conducting trade with the Caribbean, therefore be it resolved that the government of Nova Scotia initiate discussions with the Turks and Caicos to become part of the province of Nova Scotia and encourage the government of Canada to welcome the Turks and Caicos as part of our country. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice.
Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution.
Assembly unanimously endorses the Turks and Caicos become part of Nova Scotia.
Whereas the Duke of Edinburgh Award is a program of activities to challenge Canadian youth to become involved in worthwhile extracurricular activities. And whereas these activities encourage youth between the ages of 14 and 25 to excel in community service and personal growth and development. And whereas a student from Prince Arthur Junior High, currently attending Dartmouth Senior High, was recently presented with his Bronze Award. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulate Chris Saunier for earning his Duke of Edinburgh Bronze Award and wish him success in his future endeavors. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waivers is agreed. All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas since 1977, the Black Cultural Centre for Nova Scotia has served as an educational centre and museum for Nova Scotians, recognize the achievements of African Nova Scotians. And whereas on March 20, 2004, the Black Cultural Centre for Nova Scotia honored Halifax regional police officers of African heritage. Whereas the Halifax Regional Police Wall of Recognition was created to acknowledge their contribution to our community. Constable Robbie Baird's name has been added to the wall. Therefore, it be resolved that all members of this House congratulate Constable Robbie Baird and honor his service to our community. And it asks for waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Eastern Shore. Sorry, the honourable member for Shelburne.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Centerville, Shelburne County native Michael Blades has been named to the All-American Junior Skeet team after winning the World Junior 12-Gauge Skeet Championship in Massachusetts last summer. And whereas Michael, who is just completing his first year of business administration studies at Acadia University, is the son of Brian and Bonnie Blades. And whereas Michael defeated 110 other competitors in the 12-gauge competition and hopes to compete once again in the World Junior Championship scheduled this summer in Houston, Texas. They're registered, yes. Therefore, be it resolved, MLAs commend Michael Blades for his outstanding accomplishment on winning the world title while wishing him continuous success and the best of luck in defending his title in Texas this summer. And, Mr. Speaker, I request waiver.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Dartmouth North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas there are 65 Nova Scotians afflicted with a serious metabolic storage disorder known as Fabry disease, and whereas this disease causes severe pain and deterioration of the kidney, heart, brain, and nervous system, thereby causing persons with the disease to endure emotional and physical suffering that ultimately ends in premature death, and whereas the enzyme replacement therapy needed to allow persons with Fabry disease to experience dramatic improvements in their health and quality of life costs approximately $250,000 per person per year, which they cannot afford. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia government recognize the importance of providing health care to all Nova Scotians and make a decision regarding the funding of enzyme replacement therapy. Mr. Speaker, and I request waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? I hear a no. The notice is tabled. The honourable member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in his speech at the most recent annual general meeting of the Conservative Party of Nova Scotia, the Premier made a commitment to ensure increased use of Nova Scotia beef in Nova Scotia's public institutions, whereas small independent operations such as the one owned by Glenn Bowlby, a fourth-generation independent slaughterhouse owner in the Greenwood area, require immediate assistance in order to be able to capitalize on this business opportunity. Therefore, be it resolved that the Minister of Agriculture continue to meet with the independent slaughterhouse owners to determine what specific support is needed, and that the Minister commit to provide all possible support to ensure these business owners are able to meet the present business demand. Mr. Speaker, I ask for a waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Request for waiver. I hear a no. Notice is tabled. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 2004 KPMG International Business Cost Study Analysis shows Pictou County as the most cost-effective place to do business anywhere in Canada and possibly even the world. And whereas the analysis compared the cost of doing business in 121 cities and urban centers in 11 countries. And whereas the average cost to do business in Pictou County was 15% better than any of the other centers. Yes. while also making it the most cost-effective of 39 Canadian centres included in the study. Therefore, be it resolved that the Pictou County Chamber of Commerce, in crediting the local workforce and employers for making themselves cost competitive, MLAs applaud workers and businesses across Pictou County for their outstanding score and being able to stand on the world stage proudly. And I ask for waiver of notice.
Question for waivers, is it agreed? All those in favor say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas in the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, Monday, April the 19th, 2004, in conjunction with National Volunteer Week, Volunteer Spirit Day was celebrated. And whereas the volunteer flag was raised and a human chain of volunteers were formed, signifying the commencement of this week of celebration. And whereas we remember our volunteers, the heart of our community. Therefore, be it resolved that the members of this Legislative Assembly congratulate the sponsors of this event, the Cape Breton Volunteer Network Initiative, the Volunteer Resource Centre, and the Cape Breton Regional Municipality Recreation Department for their efforts in honouring the dedicated, hard-working volunteers of our community. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
Question waivers, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Westfall Coal Harbour Firefighters Association is hosting its annual banquet and awards night on Saturday, April 24th, and whereas the Westfall Coal Harbour Firefighters Association is renowned for its many brave members who risk life and limb to serve and protect the residents and the communities in the area and beyond. And whereas the evening will honor veterans Ron LaRue and Bob Pattison, who have served tirelessly with distinction during their 25-year careers. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the host join me in extending congratulations to Westfall Coal Harbour firefighters Ron LaRue and Bob Pattison for their perseverance and commitment to duty and to the community they serve. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to draw the attention of the members to the East Gallery, and I'd like to bring to their attention that we have Mary Jess McDonald from the Nova Scotia School Board Association, who is also from Inverness County, and I would ask Mary Jess to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House. Welcome.
Certainly welcome our special guest to the gallery today, the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on resolution.
I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Westfall Coal Harbour Firefighters Association is hosting its annual banquet and awards night on Saturday, April 24th, and whereas the Westfall Coal Harbour Firefighters Association is renowned for its many brave members who risk limb and life to serve and protect the residents and communities in the area and beyond, and whereas the evening will honor veterans Alan Ball and Roger Bork, who have served tirelessly with distinction during their 10-year careers, therefore be it resolved that the members of the host join me in extending congratulations to Westfall Coal Harbour firefighters Alan Ball and Roger Bork for their perseverance and commitment to duty and to the community they serve. And Mr. Speaker, I request waiver and passage without debate.
Question for waiver, is it agreed? All those in favour say aye. Counterminded, nay. Motion is carried. Orders day or questions put by members. Question period to begin at 12:47 and end at 1:47. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Premier has gone to great lengths to convince Nova Scotians and that his government has a revenue problem. And Mr. Speaker, he's blamed it on just about everything from SARS, Mad Cow, Hurricane Juan, White Juan. And Mr. Speaker, it's just about everybody's fault but their own. When the previous Liberal government imposed the unfair HST, they disbanded the Sales Tax Enforcement Unit, following the lead of the federal Liberals who had shut down the GST Enforcement Unit. Last summer, the Premier denied that there was a problem with HST fraud despite the lack of enforcement. And in this House, his ministers have also denied the problem. My question is this: when does this government intend to do something about the growing problem of revenue loss due to tax fraud?
Hear, hear. The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is a good question, and I'm referring it to the Minister of Finance.
Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member did raise that issue last year. As the honourable member knows, and as I indicated last year, the Minister of National Revenue for the federal government have been having some discussions with the provinces to take a national approach to this. It is a significant problem. In some parts of the country, it's greater than others. We all know that there's revenue losses, and we have to deal with it. But we believe that it's best dealt with on a national basis.
The honourable leader of the official opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Ham government sits by despite the existence of organized large-scale fraud to evade payment of sales tax. Recent published estimates put the underground economy at a staggering $4 billion in Nova Scotia alone. The Conservative government created a special enforcement squad to take away the life savings of seniors, Mr. Speaker. What will it take for this Premier and his government to take and to make the same concerted effort to enforce the payment of HST as they have been doing to seniors and their families for long-term care?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I refer that to the Minister of Finance.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I indicated, as we start looking at that issue, we view it as in a national context. However, we have been looking at certain areas of that. As the member indicates, areas of the government have been strengthened to look at reserving some of those. But I certainly agree with the honourable member. There's a long way to go, and it's one of the challenges that we have to meet.
The honourable leader of the official opposition on your final supplementary.
Other provinces with blended sales taxes aren't sitting on their hands, they're taking action. I want to table figures showing that since 1996, Quebec has been fighting the underground economy, and for every dollar they have invested for sales tax enforcement, the Quebec government have received more than $23 back. That is both a solid return and the kind of protection and enforcement that all taxpayers deserve. When will the government move to protect taxpayers from the big-time fraud schemes? When will they move to gain revenue and protect businesses that obey the law by cracking down on massive HST fraud?
Good question.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I share the concern of the member opposite, the leader of the official opposition. There is HST fraud going on, and it is a constant challenge for government to put in place the appropriate safeguards to protect law-abiding citizens who are anteing up the difference. And the Minister of Finance has acknowledged as well his appreciation of the problem. Government will work, as it has worked in the past, to continue to provide the assurances and the safeguards that will promote all Nova Scotians paying their legitimate share of taxes.
The honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Mr. Speaker, my question today is to the Minister responsible for the Treasury and Policy Board. Mr. Speaker, recently the NDP caucus sent a glossy brochure to every household in Nova Scotia. It is clear to anyone who has seen the brochure that it is nothing more than campaign-style political literature. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it is nothing more than a classic push poll with two leading questions.
Shame.
Mr. Speaker, the leader of the NDP has publicly confirmed that the production and distribution of this brochure was paid for out of the NDP's caucus office budget. And Mr. Speaker, we all are well aware that public funds provided to run our opposition offices are intended to be used for salaries and administration, legitimate opposition expenses, not political advertising. Mr. Speaker, on that point, I am tabling here today a sampling of the press releases issued by the NDP over the past 4 years criticizing the government for using public funds for political advertising. No. The headline is NDP Accusations of Political Spending. And Mr. Speaker, one quote from the former member John Home: "We have a province with a $500 million deficit and the Tory party is charging taxpayers for public opinion polling." My question to the Minister, Mr. Speaker, what policies are in place, Mr. Minister, to ensure that public funds provided to the opposition parties are not used for political advertising?
The Honourable Minister of Justice responsible for Treasury and Policy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I, like the honourable member, share his concern about the brochures in question and about the questions that have arisen around the propriety of those brochures being done at taxpayers' expense. I can indicate to the honourable member, as he's aware, that the Office of the Speaker is ordinarily reviews matters of correspondence and brochures in many cases and determines whether those expenditures are proper, and that is ordinarily the process that is used in determining whether things are proper expenses.
Now, Member Cape Breton South on your first supplementary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, my first supplementary. Mr. Speaker, as we all know, the Speaker's office never did approve this expenditure. And Mr. Speaker, I want to ask my question to the Minister, because in excess of $90,000 of taxpayers' money was used to produce and distribute this political campaign brochure for the NDP. And my question again to the Minister, given the fact that the Speaker's office never did approve this, what steps will the Minister take to investigate the use of public funds by the NDP?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much, and I thank the honourable member for the question. Mr. Speaker, as you're aware, the Office of the Speaker administration is reviewing the matter and is reviewing the expenditure to determine what the rules are and what the practices have been with respect to the House in the past with respect to similar expenditures, and I expect that the Speaker's office will continue their review of the matter. Thank you.
Now, Member Cape Breton South on your final supplementary.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's obvious procedures were not followed in this case, and someone in Communications Nova Scotia cut a check for this political brochure that went out by the NDP. My final supplementary to the Minister is, will the Minister demand that the NDP repay this money to the public purse?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd refer the matter to the Minister responsible for Communications Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Minister responsible for Communications Nova Scotia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, when I learned that this situation had occurred, the first thing in cooperation with the Speaker's office that we began was a review of the procedure and the document trail of how the brochure was commissioned. And currently the Director of or Acting Director of Communications Nova Scotia is reviewing the facts of the situation, how that request was made and how the tender came about, as well as the Director of Procurement is doing the same analysis in that department to ascertain the facts in the situation.
Thank you. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Education set out a news release entitled "More Money for Universities and Libraries," announcing, quote, universities receive $8 million in additional operating funds on March 31st. Well, Mr. Speaker, it seems the government got the headline they wanted. I guess it's too bad they didn't tell Nova Scotians the truth. There is not, as the government claims, an additional $8 million in the university system today, because the government is working from the 2002-2003 budget year. This means that there is only $2 million more in universities than at this time last year. That, Mr. Speaker, is a whopping 1%. My question for the Minister is this, or my question rather for the Premier is this: why does the government insist on misleading Nova Scotians about education funding?
Good question.
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the member opposite is quite right. The $8 million represents $6 million being restored to bring the amount up to last year's level. And the actual increase was $2 million, which is a 1% increase.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Universities administrators know the truth, and they can separate government's fact from fiction. Last fall, universities were forced to give back $1 million as the government scrambled to make up for the $155 rebate checks, and now they are being asked to make do with a 1% increase. The Minister of Education is making the incredible claim that this paltry increase will help limit tuition increases. I wonder if he's taken the time to ask for students' opinion on that. how does the government expect the universities in Nova Scotia to continue to offer high-quality education when they are continually starved for funding?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The universities in Nova Scotia offer extremely high-quality education. Indeed, the university system that we have in this province is probably the best in the country if you take all the institutions together. Like the honourable member, I too am concerned about the rising costs of university education. Indeed, the rising cost of higher education, whether it takes place in a university setting or a community college setting. What I can tell the honourable member is, and it's well documented, that the commitment that this government has made over its term in office to higher education has been unequaled in the history of our province.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nova Scotia's university sector is plagued with sick buildings, with massive annual tuition increases, little provincial investment in research, and a government that treats it with contempt. Yep. Since 1999, this government has cut the loan remission program, clawed back Millennium Scholarship funding, frozen operating grants, cut capital grants, and pushed our system from publicly financed to publicly assisted. My question is this: what will it take for this government to see that a real, meaningful investment in higher education is an investment in our province's future, not just a budget expenditure?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think there is a person in our province who knows about higher education that would not stand up and endorse a $123 million commitment this province made to higher education through its upcoming investment in Nova Scotia's Community College.
Here. The Honourable Member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister responsible for Communications, Nova Scotia. As has just been explained by my colleague from Cape Breton South, the NDP recently sent a political brochure to every household in Nova Scotia at taxpayers' expense. The leader of the NDP publicly stated that the expenditure was approved and paid for through the NDP caucus office budget. Mr. Speaker, we are well aware that the restrictions on use of the public funds provided to run our opposition offices. That, Mr. Speaker, is why the NDP went through the Office of Communications Nova Scotia to accomplish what they knew they could not do through the Speaker's office. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is, was the Minister aware that the NDP used Communications Nova Scotia to do an end run around the proper process?
Order, please. Order, please. The question's out of order. It's imputing motive. Order, please. Order, please. Order, please. I'll allow the honourable member to rephrase the question, please.
What part was out of order?
Well,
the whole thing?
There were actually two parts, so.
First part was all right.
Order, please. Order, please. Honourable member for Preston on the question, please.
Okay. I'll go to the next question. I'll go to Mr. Speaker. As you understand today, the Communications Nova Scotia approved a bill paid a totaling excess of $90,000 of taxpayers' money to provide and distribute a campaign-style brochure for the NDP. My questions to the Minister again are, what steps will the Minister take to investigate this gross misappropriation of funds by the NDP, aided by Communications Nova Scotia?
Order, please. Order, please. The question itself is bringing into question the credibility of members or a collection of members in the House that's not permitted. So I offer the member one more last question of the Minister of Communication, Nova Scotia.
Try this again. Mr. Speaker, the NDP claimed that proper tendering procedures were followed by Communications Nova Scotia to have the brochure produced and distributed. My question to the Minister, will the Minister undertake an investigation of the appropriateness of the tender process used in this instance and report this back to the House?
The Honourable Minister responsible for Communications Nova Scotia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question, because certainly it is a very serious question, and there needs to be very direct answers and an open process. And I can assure all members of the House that this situation only came to my attention as minister responsible in the last week. I certainly have initiated a total review of the procedure that was followed with Communications Nova Scotia, as well as the Procurement Department of Economic Development, who did the actual tendering in this process. And certainly we are turning over the facts as are reported to us to the Speaker's office, but I certainly do intend to take the undertaking to, once that's complete, to report those findings to the House as well as the people of Nova Scotia. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That's it. Order, please. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. Queen's General Hospital in Liverpool is in danger of losing its surgical services due to a loss of an anesthesiologist and the near retirement ages of the remaining 3 anesthesiologists. The District Health Authority is looking for a replacement physician, but as we all know, recruiting doctors to rural communities is challenging at best. So my question for the Minister is this: how will the new Chief Health Human Resources Officer help the Queen's General with this immediate pressing need?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the new officer to which the honourable member referred, of course, will help us better prepare for the situation which he has just described, and not only prepare for it, but put us in a position to be better able to respond to those circumstances when they arise. And in the interim, Mr. Speaker, he will work very closely with the District Health Authority to assist in finding a replacement.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the South Shore Regional is running at over 100% capacity, and the loss of services at the Queen's General will only add to the problem. Doctors will come to rural communities if they have the necessary supports. They need less on-call and cross-coverage responsibilities. They also need to be able to upgrade their skills and develop specialties. Young physicians need ongoing support and orientation as their careers progress. Mr. Speaker, I ask the Minister of Health, where are these supports to assist the District Health Authorities to recruit medical professionals to their rural communities?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, we continue to work with the District Health Authorities, and I can tell the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell the House that the Cumberland District Health Authority has recently had tremendous success, as you would know, sir, in recruiting additional surgeons and anesthesiologists. So we do work with the District Health Authorities, and we'll continue to work with them, and we'll get the kinds of successes that Cumberland has received in this province.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Long ago, doctors in this province were promised alternate funding arrangements. Some pilot projects in rural communities were cancelled, and the key element preventing alternate funding from becoming a reality is the necessary funding. So my question to the Minister of Health: you can't undertake health reform without the necessary funding. When will your government provide adequate financial support to keep services at rural hospitals?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can say to the honourable member and to you and to members of the House that we are continuing to support the District Health Authorities with additional funding year over year. We absorb the additional costs associated with delivering those services, and we're going to continue working with them. Their budgets increase on an annual basis. The only province in Canada, Mr. Speaker, that provides that level of support to the District Health Authorities. And we'll continue to provide that level of support, and we'll continue to ensure that the people of this province are well served by their health authorities.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister responsible for Service Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, we're all too familiar with how this government ignores Cape Breton, but this is a rather tragic tale, Mr. Speaker. In February of this year, the government was made aware of the situation at Forest Haven Cemetery. And this past weekend, a tragic situation occurred that proves just how callous this government can be. 12 bodies and caskets, Mr. Speaker, have been on the floor of a shed at that cemetery since February 20th. And just a few days ago, the shed was vandalized and broken into. There are at least 12 other bodies in funeral homes around Cape Breton waiting burial at Forest Haven. It was a cemetery that conducted winter burials. I'm to understand the minister will introduce a bill later this afternoon, Mr. Speaker, and I'm concerning this situation, and I'm just wondering, Mr. Speaker, why has the government waited so long to do something about this very tragic situation?
The Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In February of this year, our staff traveled to Newfoundland to meet with administrators of the company involved to ensure that Nova Scotians' assets would be protected and that their remains of their loved ones would be dealt with in a dignified manner. At that time, we were assured by administrators of the company that that would happen. We are now increasingly becoming more concerned about the fact that that may not happen in the way that we expect and those families expect it to happen. So that's why we intend to introduce legislation as quick as possible to ensure that those remains are dealt with in a dignified manner.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, those remains have been buried there, have been sitting there on the floor of this tool shed for far too long. The minister is right. This is a matter of dignity, Mr. Speaker. Those remains deserve the respect of this government, and they deserve the utmost attention. Mr. Speaker, I note that it is an offense under Section 182 of the Criminal Code to mistreat human remains. So my first supplementary is to the Minister of Justice. Why has it taken so long for this government to take any measures when there could be a violation of that section of the Criminal Code?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you very much for the question. I would indicate that, as the member would know, the duty to investigate criminal offences is with the police, and I'll refer the matter to the Minister responsible for Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Mr. Speaker, we're unaware of any circumstance that involves an offence like the member spoke about, and I know that the police have been involved in investigation, and they're not aware of it as well either.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know how you couldn't be aware of it. This story has been going on for months. This story has been in the media. This story has been in the papers. The Minister's department is fully aware of it because members or staff at that department has made press releases about this situation, Mr. Speaker. These are bodies that are being stored on the floor of a tool shed like they were a carton of tools, Mr. Speaker. It's a matter of dignity and respect for those remains. At the very least, this government has to show those remains the respect, and for their deceased, the family of those deceased as well. They should be cognizant of the public health implications as well, Mr. Speaker. So my final supplementary question then is to the Minister of Health. Upon hearing all of this news, what actions are you going to take, Mr. Minister, to minimize what is now a public health risk as a result of what is happening at Forest Haven Cemetery?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We're working very closely with the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations to ensure that this matter is resolved in an appropriate manner.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, in 2002, the Department of Community Services launched a renewal of its Community Supports for Adults program. This program affects thousands of mentally ill, developmentally challenged, and physically challenged adults across the province. Therefore, any changes to the program will have a major impact, not only on the clients of the program, but on their families, family caregivers, and service providers. My question for the Minister of Community Services is, how many groups and individuals were consulted by the steering committee in developing this discussion paper?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to give an exact number would be difficult, but I am glad that the honourable member brings up the consultation process, because I can assure the honourable member that it was extensive. It included clients, their families, service providers, advocacy organizations, staff. Everybody was invited to come in and contribute to the process. It was a very positive process, and we're very pleased that the discussion paper is out there, and taking note of the comments that are coming back thus far, and pleased with the response thus far.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley, on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, in March, this discussion paper on the future of the Community Support for Adults program was released, and the public was invited to respond to the recommendations in the report. However, the May 14th deadline for submissions is inadequate to allow groups to consult members and disseminate the report to as many clients, families, and service providers as possible. Groups have indicated that they would like that deadline extended to October 31st to ensure interested persons or groups can respond to this very important paper. My question to the Minister is, will his department extend the deadline for responding to the discussion paper?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to assure the member opposite that we want to make sure that there's adequate time to accommodate all the people that would like to respond, and we will make sure that that is so.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth, Portland Valley, on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if that's a yes or a no, but in addition to extending the deadline, groups have indicated that many of the clients, families, and service providers with important perspectives on community support for adults would find making a written submission difficult. My final question to the Minister is, will your department also set up town hall meetings across the province to allow all Nova Scotians who wish to comment to have their voices heard?
Good idea. The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, in fact, one of the avenues that we used to gather input for this discussion paper was to go out with focus groups, which would, in fact, encourage that sort of discussion. Also, we were looking outside of the province of Nova Scotia. We went to other provinces to see what was happening there. It is fluid right across the country what's happening with the Community Supports for Adults programs, and we were also looking at best practices. So in fact, I would suggest that that opportunity has already been provided as we came up to releasing the discussion paper.
The Honourable Member for Digby and Atlas.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization. Mr. Speaker, on March the 4th, the federal government announced $8 million in advance funding for damages from last spring's flooding and from Hurricane Juan. The EMO minister claimed at the time that he had submitted expenses in excess of $20 million. This morning we learned from the media reports that what the minister submitted was at very least disorganized and at worst misleading. He provided little, if any, proof of many of these supposed expenses, and the auditors were unable to find anything to back them up. My question is, would the minister please tell this House why he allowed claims for disaster relief to be sent to the federal government without the appropriate documentation?
The Honourable Minister responsible for the EMO.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's a very good question, because what the federal government asked us under their program last fall was if we would want an advance payment here in Nova Scotia. So we replied as a province in the affirmative because of the large-scale devastation from Hurricane Juan. The federal government asked us to send in estimates, not finite bills, on that particular Hurricane Juan. We responded with the estimates so that they would trigger an advance payment. The number that was requested and had been agreed upon was $10 million on $25 million worth of receipts. As normal with the federal government, it was 6 months late and only half of what had been agreed upon. So the comments in regard to the detailed expenditures, they request them on a case-by-case basis when the accounting's done, and we are supplying them to them.
The honourable member for Digby and Apples on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the issue of compensation is very important to thousands of Nova Scotians who were hurt by natural disasters in 2003. Will the minister please tell the House who prepared these claims for him and if he reviewed the documentation that was sent to Ottawa?
The honourable minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as with any program that lacks flexibility, like the federal disaster program, it's an extremely difficult and tedious process to achieve final payment under this program. We're still waiting for final payment on the 1999 disaster, and there's been 5 since that. The federal government has a protracted auditing system that requires each individual invoice to be audited. We supply the material, and once they go through that process, hopefully sometime in the future, the Nova Scotia government will be reimbursed for those expenses that we've paid up front, because people in need in disaster situations here in Nova Scotia require the money now. We as the province supply it. We wait for the federal government.
The honourable member for Digby and Apples on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, to a cynical mind, that might seem like an attempt to get additional money to prop up a disastrous budget. Would the minister be willing to provide this House with the receipts and reports required by Ottawa? If so, when? And if not, why not?
The honourable minister responsible for the Emergency Measures Organization.
Thank you very much. And I think the honourable member certainly has asked good questions, but he's not gone to where the heart of the problem is. The federal auditors certainly should have spent their time, instead of harassing provinces like Nova Scotia and citizens of Nova Scotia municipalities, their auditors should spend their time auditing such things as the gun registry, natural DNR, as well as the sponsorship program, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova.
Nova. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you. Last weekend, the Guysborough, Antigonish and Strait Area Authority used a memo to staff at the Strait Richmond Hospital to close the detox unit from Friday, April the 16th at 7 p.m. to Monday, April the 19th at 7 a.m. I'm going to table a copy of that memo that went to addiction services staff, directing them to send people seeking addiction services to Pictou or Sydney. As the Minister of Health knows, Mr. Speaker, it is a fact that Cape Breton is facing a prescription drug abuse crisis, something this government has refused to take much action to resolve. My question to the Minister is, why did he allow the closure of the detox unit at this time of crisis in Cape Breton, and what is he prepared to do to ensure that these services are not interrupted again?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member would understand and appreciate that the closure to which he refers occurred as a result of very short notice being provided by staff members who were unable to be present. And the fact is that those who required services were in fact accommodated in the short term, and others came back and were accommodated at the beginning of this week.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member Cape Breton Nova. It's first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Ham government seems to have a newfound attention to the Office of Health Promotion. Oh, yeah. But it isn't clear that the minister is going to back up with substantive funding to expand addiction services. One of the reasons the Stride area closure happened is that they didn't have enough resources or staff to keep it going on the weekend. In fact, they tell me that the unit is frequently closed. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is, will he commit today to putting the necessary funding in place to allow frontline healthcare workers and the Office of Health Promotion to deliver addiction services support to people in crisis around the clock if necessary?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I indicated in my answer to the first question, the difficulty to which the honourable member refers is one that arose not as a result of a shortage of funding, and we continue to provide funding for the services in question, and we'll continue to do that into the future, Mr. Speaker, and we'll work very closely with the DHAs to ensure that these situations are minimized to the greatest extent possible.
Member Cape Breton Nova, your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the last thing that Cape Breton needs is a loss of any addiction-related services, even on a short-term basis. We know this was going to be a problem when the government allowed the closure of a 21-day residential treatment program which provided structured treatment for about 80 people a year. Mr. Speaker, in the media lately, there's been lots of about the deaths in Cape Breton related to prescription drug use. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister is, given the ongoing crisis with prescription drugs and the frequent closure of the Stride Richmond Detox Unit, will the Minister commit today to reopening the Residential Addiction Services Program in Sydney and start dealing seriously with the drug crisis in Cape Breton?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the honourable member would know that the funding that was provided for addiction services in Sydney was reallocated, and that is based on the best professional advice that is being brought forward to the DHA, and we will continue to ensure that that funding is there, and that the services that are provided are those services which the professionals in the field feel are appropriate for the circumstances. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as the previous member asked the Minister of Service Nova Scotia regarding what's going on at Forest Haven Memorial Gardens, I would also like to ask the Minister, because earlier when the Minister was asked in the media, he said, I want the Forest Haven clients to know that their money is safe. Well, I think in reality what the folks where I come from want to know is the remains of their loved ones safe. So I asked the Minister, what are you doing to protect the remains of those people's loved ones?
The Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our staff have been working closely with the administrator of the facility. Currently, the administrator has installed a security guard on the site, and the security guard will be there around the clock 24 hours a day. But even with that, we believe that it's the government's best move to move forward with amendments to legislation to enable us to step in and make sure that those remains are treated in a dignified manner.
Now, member Cape Breton Centre on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, as it sits now in the Cemetery and Funeral Directors Act, Mr. Speaker, there are funds that go from when people purchase those plots go into perpetual care. Now, we spent the greater part of this winter with people with loved ones in that gravesite without access. There was no plowing being done. There was nothing to be done to allow loved ones to get in on whether it was Valentine's Day or birthdays to pay special respects to their loved ones. So again, I want to ask the Minister, why didn't your department step in then and allow these people to have access to this very vital piece of property?
The Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I indicated, the legislation that's before the House will enable us to do that. Currently, there is no legislation in the province of Nova Scotia that will enable us to step in. That's why I encourage members opposite to support the bill when it comes forward so that we can speedily pass this through and resolve this matter.
All member Cape Breton Centre on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we'll certainly enjoy seeing that legislation when it comes. But, Mr. Speaker, there is, what I'm trying to tell the minister, there is funding now in perpetual care by virtue of the government taking certain portions when people do buy plots in that area. I want to ask the minister once again, why isn't he accessing that money to allow that contractors clear that area and that people can get in and pay the proper respects to their loved ones that are buried in that site today, and to allow that they be properly stored instead of work sheds by shovels and by rakes?
The Honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It isn't a matter of funding being in place. It's a matter of us having the legal jurisdiction to do so. It's a matter of dignity and respect, and our government is committed to bringing forward amendments to legislation to enable us to step forward and to resolve this matter in a way that is satisfactory to the families that have family members in that facility, Mr. Speaker, and we intend to do that, and that's why I encourage all members opposite to support that legislation as quickly as possible.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question today is for the Minister of Finance. Mr. Speaker, the Supreme Court of Canada has ruled in order for a government to create or increase a user fee without introducing legislation, the fee must be equal to or less than the cost of the related service. Frankly, Mr. Speaker, I expected a flood of documentation to accompany the release of over 500 user fees that were created or raised on March 31st, 2004. Without any evidence on which to base the increases, Mr. Speaker, Nova Scotians are left to guess whether the user fees abide by the Supreme Court of Canada's ruling or if the government has in fact enacted new taxes on Nova Scotians. My question for the minister is, could the minister commit to tabling in this House by the end of today each department's calculations that justify the increased user fees?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And the fees that the honourable member has referred to, some of those fees will be addressed through the Financial Measures Act, will be tabled in this House in the next few days. Some of those fees were just done through regulations. But we can indicate, as I indicated at the time of the fees, Speaker, these were just cost of living adjustments to provide us to be able to provide the service Nova Scotians want at a reasonable rate and fee.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that some of these measures or some of these user fees will be reflected in the Financial Measures Act, I think we can be led to believe then that they are indeed new taxes and not just user fee increases. The problems with user fees run deeper than just a lack of openness and accountability. In fact, they hurt the poor much more than they do the wealthy or the people with stable income. It is very much like Robin Hood in the reverse. Cutting income taxes while increasing user fees is having a devastating effect on those who can afford it least. My question, Mr. Speaker, is can the minister please explain to this House why the government is following a policy of taking from the poor and giving to the rich?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I think the honourable member is attempting to go somewhere where she really doesn't want to. It's when the budget is introduced this week, and we've indicated we are going to protect poor people. We've indicated that our whole budget and our process will be to support those working Nova Scotians and people on lower incomes. It'll all become clear to that honourable member.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think perhaps the Minister of Finance is referring to his reversal of a tax cut to some degree because they realized the mistake that was made earlier in this year. Mr. Speaker, since the government has spent so much time as well this year talking about the federal government, I think it's worth noting that the federal government has introduced
Order, please. There's too much noise in the chamber. The Honourable Member Halifax Clayton Park has the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, the federal government has introduced a policy on user fees, Bill C-212, that ensures that user fees are justified and not simply a new tax. So my final question to the minister is the Minister of Finance prepared to follow Ottawa's good example and introduce in this House, I'll just wait.
Order, please. Order, please. The Honourable Member of Halifax Clayton Park on the question.
Thank you. Is the Minister of Finance prepared to follow Ottawa's good example and introduce in this House a bill that would implement a clear and transparent user fee policy and protect Nova Scotians from unjustified user fee hikes?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I presume the bill she refers to was the one that just went through on the end of March. Mr. Speaker, what I can tell this House is this government will never follow Ottawa's example.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question through you is to the Minister responsible for Service Nova Scotia. As we heard earlier, Forest Glen Haven Memorial Gardens at Cape Breton are facing some difficulties, and so is Heatherdale Memorial Gardens in Pictou County. And their operations in both cases ceased last year. In these cemeteries, burial and maintenance have been put on hold until there is a sale. And this is causing undue distress for families in Pictou County as well as elsewhere. So my question through you, Mr. Speaker, is with time being of the essence, Minister, what are you doing to facilitate a sale as soon as possible at Heatherdale Memorial Gardens?
The Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia, Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have been in discussion with the administrator of the company. As the member pointed out, the company has wound down operations as a result of the owner, the proprietor, passing away last year. We have been in discussion with possible owners as well. We've been in discussion with the administrator, and we will work with the administrator and possible owners to try to ensure that this facility will continue to operate in a seamless fashion.
The Honourable Member for Pictou West, and your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I understand that at Heatherdale Memorial Gardens there's been some difficulties there. First of all, locating accurate maps that show the burial plots and other records. And I know certainly there are funeral home directors waiting to do spring burials. Many of those plots on this location have been pre-purchased for many years. So my question through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, what assurances can you give to these families that their loved ones will be buried in an accurate and timely fashion?
The Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia, Municipal Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will assure the families that we will do everything in our power to ensure that that will happen. But part of that will require speedy passage of a bill that we intend to bring before this House, and we will do that as soon as it's ready. It's my expectation that it'll be ready at some point in time today so that we can move forward in a legal way and deal with this issue in a timely manner. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Pictou West on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As you know, spring has sprung and the grass is starting to grow. And I know in the cemetery the grass will soon be coming under full bloom. Under the Cemetery and Funeral Services Act that's been established, maintenance is part of the responsibility of the cemetery owner. I would like to ask the Minister, if no sale occurs soon, is your department prepared to step in and look after necessary maintenance?
The Honourable Minister of Service Nova Scotia.
Mr. Speaker, as I indicated earlier in responses, amendments to the Act will enable us to step in and administer and operate this facility for the interim basis. There is a perpetual care fund in place. We believe it is sufficient to handle costs associated with maintenance of that facility. And when we get this piece of legislation before the House and passed, we will then be able to do what is necessary to ensure that the facility operates in a seamless fashion, and we intend to do that.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Kings West.
My question is for the Minister of Education. University tuition is at an all-time high in Nova Scotia, in fact the highest in Canada, and there's no relief in sight. Yesterday the government announced $8 million in additional funding. In fact, they were simply re-announcing $6 million. There is only $2 million of real new money. Given this government's lack of real support for post-secondary institutions in this province, it is not surprising that students have not seen relief from skyrocketing tuition fees. Could the Minister explain to the House how much tuition fees will be reduced after yesterday's $2 million announcement?
The Honourable Minister of Education. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you for the question. The Premier answered the distribution of the funds very well. I think it was the first question starting note today. And what happened was, at the end of 2002, 2003. Anyway, the university were given a certain amount of money, and it flowed through the same way this year at the March 31st, 2004. You're right about the new money. However, I would encourage the honourable member to wait until the budget documents are tabled before he draws a conclusion.
The honourable member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Truth of the matter is that $2 million is not going to slow down the rate of tuition increases. In fact, as we sit here, the Board of Governors at Dalhousie are increasing tuition fees by 7.25%. The current system is simply unsustainable. This government has promised a multi-year funding strategy for universities, but instead we get half measures and sleight-of-hand announcements like the one made yesterday. My question, when can universities and students expect the government to introduce multi-year stable funding?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, the Department of Education is currently, Department of Education, other representatives of government is currently trying to establish a memorandum of understanding with the universities, which will see 3-year funding put in place, which will enable them to predict the amount of revenue that they're going to have much more effectively than they do now.
The honourable member for Kings West on your final supplementary.
In the last 4 years, there's been no substantive debt relief for students. All we have are Band-Aids and tinkering rather than a long-term plan to control rising tuition. Students and parents simply cannot plan for financing a university education when there is so much uncertainty. When will the government finally provide students and universities a long-term, stable funding so that students entering university today know what they will be paying in 4 years?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think any government in any country in any state is going to be able to say what is going to cost for university in 4 years, at least not current, given the current financial, and I don't really think that was the intent of the question. But what I want to do, what I want to emphasize is that we are in the process of negotiating this memorandum of understanding, and it will contain funding on a 3-year basis, and once we have this stable funding in place, much like the DHAs, they now know their business planning process is much easier than it was before the 3-year cycle of funding was put in place for them, and we expect the same result for the universities once that agreement is completed.
The honourable member for Dartmouth South, Portland Valley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is again for the Minister of Community Services. Mr. Speaker, in the last few months, 2 non-profit childcare centres have had to close because of financial problems. Daycare operators met with the minister asking for an $11.20 per day increase for subsidized seats just to cover basic costs. Operational funding has not increased since 1998. This government loves to blame the lack of federal supports. But in a case where the federal government is providing some funding, the best you could do was 50 cents a day in increased subsidies. My question to the Minister of Community Services, why is your government allowing the continued underfunding of daycare, jeopardizing the future of even more child care centres?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question because it is true that I certainly have been very critical of the federal government in some areas when it pertains to equalization and Medicare, and I think rightly so. But I would also tell the member opposite that in some areas the federal government has done very well, and in their support of early childhood development, and specifically Minister Stewart, I think that her performance has been exemplary. And in fact, after the cabinet shuffle, I sent her a letter commending her for her performance. I would say, Mr. Speaker, it is nice to see that the federal government is in supporting early childhood development. They are not the main funding partner. That remains the province, but we certainly welcome them. as the funding partner, and that's why we made childcare the priority from when we rolled out the vision document and made stabilizing the wages with a $4,000 subsidy per full-time childcare worker, the first thing that came out of the new program. Thank you, Mr.
Dartmouth,
Speaker.
Portland Valley, and a first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, there are several more child care centers that are just one unexpected bill away from being forced to close. Many of these centers serve low-income, high-need families in this province. Daycare operators have been told there may be more federal money for their operating funds. And it's my understanding that in the meeting with the minister, it was suggested that if any more money was coming from the federal government, that would be distributed as an increase beyond the 50 cents per day per subsidized seat. Now we understand that the department is suggesting that money will be reallocated after a review is conducted. So my question to the minister, time is ticking for these centers. How long are you prepared to make them wait for adequate funding to finally become a reality?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I do appreciate these questions because it's important that we clear up exactly what has been going on in this area. Effective April the 1st, the 50 cent per day increase in the subsidized child care subsidy became effective. A letter has gone out to the various affected child care centers. Also, there has been a request to do a subsidy review of the department, which was undertaken before I met with the nonprofit child care center executive directors, and I have taken steps to expedite that process so that it will be completed within what I would anticipate a couple of months so that we can act on the recommendations as was requested by the sector. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for her question.
Or the Honourable Member Dartmouth South, Portland Valley, and your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, if this government truly valued child care services in the province, it would continue stable, adequate funding while conducting its review. The challenges facing the daycare sector have been obvious to the department for several years. So I ask the Minister of Community Services, will you commit to ensuring not one more centre closes its doors while your department delays increasing operational and much-needed funding?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want to refer to the vision document that was agreed upon back on May the 1st, 2001. Our children, today's promise, today's investment, tomorrow's promise. That laid out how we would be investing the early childhood development monies, and we have followed that path, and we will continue to follow that path. That was worked out with broad consultation, and we trust that the sector still agrees with the course that was taken at that time.
The Honourable Member for Glace Bay.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, I think we were all waiting with rather eager anticipation today at the Premier's announcement where he would provide some details how he plans to address the issue of wait times. But alas, Mr. Speaker, we heard absolutely nothing at that announcement. And Mr. Speaker, if you don't know where your challenges are, you can't begin to address the problem with a proper plan. I note, Mr. Speaker, in the document entitled Your Health Matters, a paragraph on page 31 states that the minister will, by the fall of 2003, report to all Nova Scotians on how long people are waiting for procedures. No report on how long people has been waiting has been produced, which translates, Mr. Speaker, into exactly what this government has done, absolutely nothing about the problem.
Order, please. Order, please. Time allotted for question period has expired. I recognize the Honourable Member for Preston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to initially make an introduction in the West Gallery. I'd like to introduce residents of the Cherrybrook, Lake Loon, Westfall, and Montague areas of my riding. The group is part of the Boundary Action Reversal Committee to have Cherrybrook, Lake Loon, Westfall, Montague, and Little Salmon River reviewed in the regional municipality upcoming review that was done by the Public Utilities Board. And I'd like to introduce the people that are there. It's Edward Beals, Viola Fraser, Russell Bundy, Bernadine Hodges, Portia Ryan, Ruby Beals, Teresa Smith, Wayne Bundy, Sarah Bundy, Alma Johnson, Marion Bundy, Pearl Sparks, and Burl Bundy, Evelyn Riley, and Howard Riley. And I'd ask the House to give them a warm welcome.
Certainly welcome our special guests to Gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings. The Honourable Member for Preston.
Yes, I would ask the indulgence of the House to revert to the presenting and reading of petitions with their permission.
Is it agreed? Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Petition, we the undersigned hereby petition the Halifax Regional Municipality and the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board to amend the order of proposed boundary change of District D to include Cherrybrook, Lake Loon along number 7 highway to Little Salmon River Bridge, north to Lake Major, up the middle of Lake Major to where it joins District D, and that will be in the upcoming municipal election be held this fall. Thank you.
Thank you. The petition is tabled. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to draw the members' attention to the West Gallery so that we can have an introduction, please. There are two members of the organization Video Online Lottery Terminator Society there. Bernie Walsh is the director, if you'd stand to be recognized. And also with him today are Reagan Fraser, who's a member of the organization. Both of, certainly the organization's work is well known to legislators, and I'd like us to welcome him today. Thank you.
Certainly welcome our guests to Gallery today as well. Government business, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call the order of business public bills for second reading?
Public bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, would you please call Bill number 46, the Public Service Act?
Bill number 40. 46. Bill number 46, the Honourable Minister of Tourism and Culture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I rise in my place today as Minister of Health Promotion. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to stand up to make a few comments in second reading of Bill number 46, an act to establish the Office of Health Promotion, an act which reflects, Mr. Speaker, our Premier's commitment and our government's commitment, Mr. Speaker, to improving the health of our children, of our families, and of our communities across our province. A commitment that we feel so strongly about that we believe that it should be firmly established in legislation. The Act to establish the Office of Health Promotion gives my office responsibilities for matters related to health promotion and general preventative health measures. Mr. Speaker, the fact is that too many Nova Scotians are suffering from poor health. Too many people are ill for much of their lives or die too young, or illnesses and injuries that are preventable. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, our province faces many challenges, including inactivity and obesity, which is putting our children at risk for a whole host of health problems both now, Mr. Speaker, and in the future. We hear a lot more about waiting lists, Mr. Speaker. In fact, it come up during question period, and health care spending. And while we continue to invest more money in those areas and to improve health services, the best long-term solution to wait lists is ultimately to keep people healthy. And that's what our government intends to do. We have reviewed research, Mr. Speaker, during the past year, looked at best practices, and consulted extensively with our stakeholders as we built a plan for our office. The strategic priority areas we've decided to focus our efforts on the next few years, Madam Speaker, are addiction prevention, tobacco control, physical activity, healthy eating, healthy sexuality, and injury prevention. Some of these areas, Madam Speaker, are well underway and are already making a difference, while others are new for our government, with many initiatives coming forward in the upcoming weeks, Madam Speaker. Since the Active Kids, Healthy Kids strategy was introduced in 2002, we've seen more children getting active. 11 schools across our province are active school community pilot sites. They've turned classrooms into fitness rooms. They've bought bike racks, and they've started after-school programs with students as leaders. Mr. Speaker, since the time of our government coming into power, smoking rates in Nova Scotia have dropped by 5% since our tobacco control strategy was introduced in 2001. And interim numbers this year thus far show an even further decrease, which is very positive news for all members of this House and certainly for our general population. We've cleared the air in public places and we've provided help for people to stop smoking, and we will have further commitments in the days ahead. Our continued commitment to this strategy will see a further decrease, as I mentioned, in our smoking rate. Madam Speaker, more than 400 Nova Scotians die each year from injuries that are predictable and preventable. This is a new area of focus on a health crisis that we cannot ignore. Madam Speaker, we are one of the only provinces in our country to have a focused injury prevention strategy, and details on that strategy will be rolled out in the coming weeks. Madam Speaker, as a school teacher and previous to becoming a politician in 1999, Madam Speaker, I have seen many of the challenges our young people face. Really, truly, we must take a generational change if we really want to make a difference and change the culture of our province. If we can help our children form healthy lifestyle habits now, they'll be more likely to carry those healthy lifestyles forward into the future. We need to teach our residents, both young and old, to be active, to eat healthy and make wise choices when making those decisions on their food choices, to make healthy decisions and to value their health. Some of these things can happen overnight, Madam Speaker. People can start wearing a seatbelt, they can join a quit smoking support group, can go for a walk, but the real results will take time, perhaps even a generation. To get there, though, Madam Speaker, we need to spend money now. And we need to invest. And that is the very reason we have made a commitment to the Office of Health Promotion to double the funding during our mandate as a government, Madam Speaker. And we will see some of those investments being made as the Minister of Finance puts forward his budget in a couple of days' time. Madam Speaker, legislating the Office of Health Promotion underscores our commitment to improving the long-term health and well-being of Nova Scotians. And Madam Speaker, I look forward to hearing the comments of my colleagues in the legislature, both from the NDP, the official opposition, and also from the third party, the Liberal Party, Madam Speaker. And I believe this is an act that we can all agree that is in the best interest of long-term health and well-being of Nova Scotians. And I certainly look forward to their comments as we move forward to second reading. Thank you.
The honourable member from Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I looked at the Act to amend Chapter 376 of the Revised Status 1989, the Public Service Act, to establish the Office of Health Promotion. In that Act, Madam Speaker, Section 25D, the Office of Health Promotion is responsible for all matters related to promoting a culture of good health, general preventative health measures in areas of healthy living, addiction prevention, problem drinking and problem gambling. I don't see any in there to do with drugs or prescription drug use. I looked at, Madam Speaker, tobacco control. Well, this government, Madam Speaker, to date collects all these revenues from taxes on tobacco, but yet those revenues go into the general coffers of the government, not into the Health Promotion Act. Maybe they should look at actually putting some more money from their increase in tobacco taxes, not just recently, and to fund some of these programs around here. And like the minister had just said in his former job, my former job was youth worker and executive director of the Whitney Pier Youth Club. So I have full knowledge of what it's like not to have recreation for programs in the kids in my area of Whitney Pier, and how much the money is needed to run healthy living, healthy active, making kids more active. Obesity is on the rise in the country. I think that there's some good things in this act. I think overall, I think the party, we support the bill, but the question of the government's actual commitment to the health promotion, the actual commitment of spending the money and making sure that the money is going where it's needed the most. That's my concern with this bill, Madam Speaker. Proper nutrition, I see that in the bill. I said proper nutrition. Does that mean that the Office of Health Promotion is going to start funding breakfast programs in the schools in the province of Nova Scotia. Is that a good idea for them to start funding those programs? A well-needed program that started in my youth centre in the Pier 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years ago this May. We had the first breakfast program. So I'm just wondering, with those new taxes, maybe from the tobacco and other taxes that are going up, could you look at actually the government funding some of those programs? Sexuality programs. Sexuality, we saw the trouble that they had for with the brochure. But I mean, this money could be spent well in these non-profit organizations like Boys and Girls Clubs and other groups that are out there that are actually hands-on and do the work 24/7 a day with these kids. Not bureaucracy and communications. And I do have a difficulty with that, Madam Speaker. As recently as in December of 2003, the Office of Health Promotion went and put a tender out to create an image for the office. A tender worth $70,000. Now, I personally think that that money would have been, those resources should have been directed to the actual health promotion. $70,000 for a logo, for an image. There was nobody in the office at the time that the tender went out. I mean, you know, I'm trying to figure out where the office is. I mean, there's some things, I mean, I agree with the bill, but there's some things in this bill that I just, you know, without a proper health promotion strategy, you know, to tackle the growing demands on our healthcare system, Madam Speaker, our health budget will continue to be pushed to the breaking point in this province. And I think this is a good way for us to start to deal with some of those health issues. But start at the grassroots, not in the bureaucracy and not in the communication. Get out there and get out and work with the people that are hands-on in every community in Nova Scotia. You know, less than 4% of the Department of Health's $1.9 billion is spent on health promotion in this province, Madam Speaker. I mean, maybe we should have a look at putting the percentage up a little higher to spend some more money on our most valuable resources, our kids and our youth in these communities, Madam Speaker. The Office of Health Promotion is excellent to provide the government, is going to put some more resources behind it and emphasize programs. Well, I mean, I understand that, but I mean programs, results rather than bureaucracy. That's what I'd like to see, Madam Speaker. I'd like to see some results. If the office is going to be highly involved in doing some youth programming, whether it be Boys